Welcome to the ULAT. If this is your first exposure to the program, welcome, and let me explain what ULAT means. ULAT, those letters, stand for Universal Language Acquisition Tool. And this is a program I've created which is based upon what I call the natural language acquisition sequence. The natural means of learning one's native language proceeds from listening and speaking as an infant and to a small child, and then to reading about the age of 5 typically, and then even a little bit later to the act of writing, as opposed to the traditional textbook approach, I should say maybe the text-based approach, which you find in a traditional language classroom where you have written exercises and reading exercises, activities right from the very first day of class practically. And that's inconsistent with the way in which we learned our native language. And the ULAT seeks to teach you to think in your new language as does a native speaker. And to do that, it follows this natural language acquisition sequence. Practically, what that means for you is that approximately the first 70 lessons, you will see no words whatsoever in written form, any text whatsoever. This is because we don't want you to think with reference to your native language, nor with reference to printed text. My goal is to train you to think in a two-step thought process, going directly from the level of a concept in your mind to the target language, to this new language you're learning, expressing yourself in this new language, as opposed to the result of traditional text-based instruction, where a person learns to think in a 5-step process and ends up speaking in a very awkward, stilted, halting fashion. If you're really interested in understanding the theory behind all this, which I doubt you are, you could go to the teachers section of the ULAT website and there watch the first video in which I explain in more detail why text-based instruction too early in a student's learning, before a student is developed relative oral fluency, is actually very damaging to their prospects of ever speaking a language fluently. But I'll just assume that you buy into my method for the moment. And what is my method? Well, let me show you a brief presentation of the ULAT method. So what is the ULAT method of language transmission? Well, here are 8 different stages presented on this screen right here that talk about elements that you'll commonly find in ULAT lessons. All elements will not necessarily be present in every lesson, but you'll find these throughout the ULAT. The first stage is, I call the observation stage, and this is where you are presented with a video clip of an action of some kind, or a still image of a noun, an object, or maybe a quality a person would have, which is to say an adjective. And as you're presented with this image or video clip, you hear a sound associated with it that you are to repeat. This is a video clip of the concept of to listen. Now, I just gave you the meaning of this word. That will not happen in the ULAT. There's no translation whatsoever. Through being exposed to the same word in various contexts, you'll come to understand their meaning. But for the sake of this presentation, I'll go ahead and tell you what things mean. So I click on the image.
Escuchar.
And you see the man who is listening to music, obviously, with a headset on. And you hear the word in Spanish, escuchar, which is the verb in Spanish, to listen. The next step is after you've been exposed to and got a first sense of what might be the meaning of the word, you've been exposed to that word and its pronunciation, you will see a gesture which I have you perform at first to aid you in retention of that vocabulary. As I click on this picture, watch the gesture that I perform to represent the idea of to listen.
Escuchar.
There you see escuchar.
Escuchar.
Escuchar. And of course you repeat it, not just the word, but you repeat the gesture too. Which helps you in retention of that vocabulary. Performing a motor activity, an activity with your body, at the same time that you say a word, greatly enhances your ability to recall, to remember that vocabulary. The third stage is once you've learned this gesture, I take a still image from that particular video clip that represents the idea of listening, and that still image, as I click on it, escuchar, comes to represent this concept, this idea of listening throughout the course of the rest of the ULAT program. The fourth stage, I put that still image into a sentence, into a series of images which form a sentence, And these other images are ones that you would have already been, with which you would have already been presented. and therefore you would understand readily. This, for example, again, I wouldn't translate normally, but here for your sake, to help you understand the process, I will. This is he listens to the radio. I click on any of these three images and I hear
Él escucha la radio.
Él escucha la radio, which in Spanish, of course, is he listens to the radio. The next step, the fifth step, it's now time for you to form the complete sentence yourself. You see these three different statements, assuming you've already learned the vocabulary for music, classical music and rock music. You would be able to say, Él escucha la radio, and then you click, or excuse me, Él escucha música, and then you click on the images.
Él escucha música.
And you can confirm whether you said the statement correctly or incorrectly. Next, Él escucha música clásica.
Él escucha música clásica. Él escucha música rock.
And I clicked on it too soon, but
Él escucha música rock.
and I confirm that I said the statement correctly. So now I've learned how to structure sentences using this particular vocabulary, this new word that I just learned, to listen. The sixth stage I call the acceleration stage or phase. And this phase is critical because now that you've learned to form a complete statement using this new vocabulary, I want you to be able to do so at an increasingly rapid rate of speed, so that eventually at the end of the video that you're about to see, you're being obliged to form this statement so quickly that there's no time to reflect in your native language. This is one of the tools that helps you learn to think in a two-step process rather than in that unwieldy, destructive five-step process I mentioned earlier. So let me show you what one of these PowerPoint videos resembles. You'll see a statement, and after the green screen, you have a certain leisurely period of time in which to form this statement. And then you'll hear the correct answer given to you before we move on to the next sentence. You'll say, Él escucha música. He listens to music. And you'll make a statement, and then you'll hear, Tú escuchas música clásica. Again, you form the statement, and you'll hear, Yo escucho música rock, etc. However, as we get farther and farther along, Él escucha, ellos escuchan un CD. You see a yellow screen now. Now you have less time in which to form your statement, 1 second less, in fact. And these same statements will be presented to you. You need to form the statement now with less time before you hear the correct answer provided for you. And finally, you see the red screen, and now everything flies. Ellos escuchan la música clásica. Él escucha música rock. Tú escuchas la radio. Yo escucho un CD. You can see that you have very little time in which to form the statement. That's going to take practice and repetition, but the outcome, the fruit of this activity is very, very valuable. The ability to think in this two-step process rather than thinking in a way that passes through your knowledge of English first before you can form your statement. Well, those are the different stages of oral language development. Eventually, you will also be exposed at the 7th level to phonics instruction first. That is to say, the sounds created by different combinations of letters in the language you're learning, and then to a variety of different reading activities. Very elementary at first, accompanied by questions and giving the opportunity to engage in conversation with your instructor. And then finally, once you have a strong oral base and you've been exposed to the phonics of the language, you can read at an elementary level. You begin with elementary writing, and that occurs, that's the 8th stage of the ULET process. Well, I've talked a little bit about my own theories as to how language is best presented and best learned, but why go to all the trouble of learning a language in the first place? Over the course of the next 3 or 4 videos, I'd like to talk about my own personal motivations for learning the languages that I did, and why I'm so happy that I went to the trouble. And the most fundamental reason for learning a language, of course, is to know people whom you could not know otherwise unless you could speak their native language. To be in a position to be influenced by them, or to influence them, or to be of service to them, and vice versa, at some point of their lives. That leads me to a story about when my wife and I, along with our children, lived in the far north of France, and I served as an assistant pastor of a church. And the people within our church ran every summer a kids club within on the ground floor of an apartment complex where we had a room that was available for our use. The kids we worked with were maybe 8 to 12 years old, more or less. But there was one older fella, his name was Emmanuel, who was 14 years of age. By that point, he'd already dropped out of school. Yes, it was possible at that point. at that time. And he would ride around the town on his motorbike looking for things to do to occupy his time. Well, when he would come to our kids' club's meeting, he wouldn't come inside. Rather, he would stay outside and tend to kind of make life difficult for us, speaking to the neighbors about us in a way that made us look kind of foolish, and basically being disruptive. And finally, I decided I need to go outside and just spend time with this guy so that I can keep him from disrupting the meetings. And I went out and started talking with him. And as time went by, I came to learn that this young fella didn't have many friends, basically. He needed somebody to befriend him, to spend time with him. And that's what I started doing. He would invite me over to his home. And I didn't necessarily go very willingly. It was not a very happy home life, unfortunately. However, I sensed this young fella needed a friend. And so I regularly would go over to his home, and we'd watch TV, we'd have a meal together, potentially. We'd just sit and talk. And although it was with great hesitation that I would go back, because it was not a happy home life, and I didn't necessarily feel respected in that situation, eventually, Emmanuel and I became to be pretty good friends, and he would come to my family's home, decorate the Christmas tree with us, have a meal with us, spend time with my family, got to know my kids very well. Well, this went on over the course of several years until my family and I moved back to the United States, and I lost track of him. However, just a few years ago, I received an email from him when he discovered my email address and that we could communicate in that fashion. And this is what he wrote. By the way, if you can read French, if you already know how to read and write French, you'll recognize that his French is not very accurate, that there are a lot of grammatical mistakes, and that's not surprising because he dropped out of school so early. But what he had to say was of great value to me. He wrote, "Dear Steve," that's not how you spell my name, but I am very touched to see that we can still communicate by mail. What a privilege, what a privilege it is to find one another again. I'm feeling immense joy in my heart to see that you're all doing well. I'd sent him a picture of my family. He knew my family members, and that's to what he's referring. Steve, I want you to know of my love for you. And I remember every time that you came to encourage me, and all the times that you played the role of a father in my life. I don't forget, and I really want to tell you that as for me, you play an important role in my life, dear Steve. We still have strong ties one to another. Well, for me, that's really the essence of the privilege of learning another language, is for the ability to be available to somebody who needs you to be available to them in their native language. So whatever the struggles you go through, try and envision the goal, envision the opportunity someday to know, to serve, to be influenced by, to influence the lives of the people that need you to speak their language. Well, before I close, let me just give you a quick whirlwind tour of the organization of the ULAT program, and then I can set you loose to explore it on your own without my help. So let's go first to the home page of the ULAT. Here you see the home page of the ULAT, and across the top you see a number of links to portions of the website I'd like to explain briefly. Orientation simply takes those students or teachers or parents who've never used the website before and gives them an explanation as to what the ULAT is, why you would want to use it, how you'd use it in school, how you'd use it if you're homeschooled. The daily plans section is worth looking at. Daily plans has to do with the 165 days of class periods in the course of a year, and if you click on any one of these buttons, it will tell you what activities that you are to perform on that particular day. I'll talk more about this in a few moments. The next button is, or next link on the home page, is to the specific lessons within the ULAT. And for example, we click on Spanish here, and you see the table of contents that takes you through all 10 units of the ULAT. And by clicking on these green buttons, you can go directly to the lessons in question. And of course, you see the content of that lesson is explained. Next, video chat. This is a means, I won't go into detail now, but this is a means of allowing you to practice your language skills with other ULAT learners all around the world. And the next section, teachers. This is a section where teachers can see both videos and read articles that help them understand how to use the ULAT in class. The next section, feedback. This gives you some of the feedback from people who have used the ULAT, indicating what their experience has been like. contact. This gives you an email address to which you can write to someone at the ULAT, and that your message will be responded to quite promptly. Here you see subscribe, and this is where people can either as a family or individual subscribe, or as a school subscribe to the use of the ULAT. And then finally start, and this is important. This is of course where you start. This is if you look at the very bottom of this brief introduction to the ULAT, you see it says daily plans, and this is taking you to day 0. The idea of going to, and I'm going to go back to the home page right now, going to the daily plans and beginning your day as opposed to going directly to a particular lesson. The importance of doing that is the following. Lessons, let me show you how lessons, if I wanted to go to lesson, let's say 3.6, and we're studying French, we'll say, I'd click on a course French. The 3 means Unit 3, the 6 means Lesson 6 within Unit 3. And so here I am in the table of contents for French. I'll click on Unit 3, and that'll allow me to skip past Units 1 and 2 in the table of contents. You see that 3.6 is about clothing, and if I click on the 6 here, this will take me directly to the lesson in question, where there are videos and activities to perform. As for exactly what you're supposed to do in each section of a lesson, this is called a symbolic direction that tells you, for example, in this case, that you're supposed to listen, strictly listen to the activities within this particular section. The symbolic directions, such as to listen, let's go down a little farther and find another one. Here you see, right here, this means you're supposed to time yourself in performing this next activity. Well, these symbolic directions, which tell you what to do in each section of the ULAT, they'll be explained in the next video, so we won't go into that at this point. So in any case, that's how you'd find lesson 3.6. You go to contents, you click on the lesson, the language you're studying, and then on the particular unit, the 3 indicates Unit 3, and then of course you see the 6 indicates the 6th lesson within Unit 3. You click on the green button and that takes you to the lesson itself. However, unless you already know that that's the particular lesson that you want to review, you've already dealt with it, it is highly advised to go to daily plans each day to see what your activities should be and not to go directly to the lesson. Here's why. The lessons any of the lessons may require up to 4 days of study. Each lesson does not equal one single day of study. But rather it could be as many as 4, even 5 days are devoted to a particular lesson. And therefore it's far better for you to go to the daily plans and then choose the language of your choice. Let's take Spanish this time. This is the Spanish 1 course, and you'll see there are 165 days in the first year of Spanish. And let's click on lesson or day 22. When we click on day 22, this tells us what it is that you're supposed to, the activities you're supposed to perform, and provides links to take you to those activities. For example, here you see, click here to practice the 4 forms of the lesson 1.16 test. You click there, and within the lesson 1.16, it takes you directly to the test. And then down below, in the second activity of the day, you see that you're to watch this video. And this is why it's so important you go to the daily plans and not just directly to the lessons. If you bypass the daily plans, you will miss these videos that provide some introductory explanation to the information that we presented to you in the lesson. And so it's really critical that you go to the daily plans each day and not directly to the lesson. So the third one here says, click here to go to lesson 1.17 and the activities, and to perform, it should say, the activities in sections 3 through 5. So we click here, and then we go down to section 3. Each section is marked off by a red line. So there's the first, second, and here's the third section, fourth section, and watch for another red line. The 5th section starts right here, all right there. Okay, at the beginning of every section, by the way, you see the symbolic direction. This means speak. You are to say the statements indicated by these images here. Okay, so by far, going to the daily plans each day is the way you should go about your studies to find out what specific activities you should do on that particular day. Click on daily plans, check click on the language that you're studying as well as the year, and then choose, for example, day 22 again, and you'll see the activities that you should perform on that day. And it also indicates to you what you'll be studying in the next class. And at the bottom, you see links to other days' lessons that you've already studied. Well, that's enough for today. Tomorrow we'll go into more specific detail as to how to actually use a ULAT lesson. We'll look at a lesson, we'll look at the different elements, the parts of it, talk about the symbolic directions, which are pictures that tell you what activity to perform in each section of a particular lesson. So at this point, you're free to explore a little bit through the ULAT website, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.